I will not eat. I am innocent. I will take nothing from you.
Oh, we're going to have a splendid time with you on the cover.
Pas l'euro! Le public est averti que Paul Andrew Kimball, dit le tenant, ont visité à Louisbourg, est coupable d'avoir volé une chemise. Il a été condamné à passer 2 heures au carcan de cette ville. The public is advised that Paul Andrew Kimball, nicknamed the Annoying One, and from personal experience, I can tell you it's quite true.
That's just gratuitous.
A visitor to Louisbourg has been found guilty of stealing a shirt. He is to be placed in the iron collar of this town for 2 hours.
So what now?
Get home! You skunk!
You're all pawns of the upper class.
How dare you disrupt our beloved social order!
Oh, because I believe in socialism! Vive la révolution! You, monsieur, look like a fine, upstanding working man. You work hard for your living, and yet you are oppressed by these types here. They take all the money,
We do.
You do all the work.
They do.
That sounds unfair to me.
Not to me.
I know it doesn't to you, but there's more of them than there are you.
Yes, but we have the guns.
For now,
Your ideas are strange and evil, I assume.
one of those two things is true.
His ideas are dangerous.
Possibly.
You should beat him up and then shoot him. Merci, monsieur.
History will vindicate me.
Really?
I will be viewed as a revolutionary, as a martyr to the cause.
You just saw an example why there is no rule of mob here.
Yeah, I know, but I'm a Time Lord, and I've been to the future. I'm just telling you, it's going to end up poorly for you.
What are you doing?
Come on.
What are you doing?
Hello, Spike.
Get out of here. Let me go.
Try and come to.
What are you arresting me for? For what?
Come and see.
For what?
See?
Do anything. I didn't do anything. Why are you arresting me? For what? Let me out of here.
Il a été condamné à passer 2 heures au carcan de cette ville. The public is advised that Sandy MacLean, nicknamed the Annoying One, a visitor to Louisbourg, has been found guilty of stealing a shirt. He is therefore to be placed in the iron collar of this town for 2 hours. Ce fait en présence de Joseph-Félix Chesnay, huissier audiencier au Conseil supérieur et bailliage royal de Louisbourg, de l'île Royale. Vive le roi! Soldats, amenez le condamné!
Oh, monsieur.
What do you want? Or what? All right.
Marchons!
Yeah, shame on me. I'm disgusting, yeah. Come ahead. Another one. Now you got the kids doing it.
Shame on you, you thief! Shame on me, daddy! don't want anything more to do with you because you're a thief.
I drink because of you.
See what I mean?
Drink because of mirrors.
Tambour! The public is hereby advised that Sandy MacLean he is to be placed in the iron collar of this town for 2 hours. Se fait en présence de Joseph-Félix Chesnay, huissier audiencier au Conseil supérieur et bailliage royal de Louisbourg, de l'île Royale. Mesdames et messieurs, vive le roi!
I'm going to beg for my husband.
Sing a song, is it?
Sing!
All right.
Entertain us!
Everybody knows this one. Oh, Canada. Come on.
What's it mean?
Our home and native land.
Tambour! L'humiliation publique est une façon utilisée pour punir et décourager la vie criminelle à Louisbourg. Au 18e siècle, cet homme aurait resté ici pour 2 heures, mais, pendant peu, on les libère maintenant comme si 2 heures auraient déjà passé. Public humiliation is one of the ways we punish and discourage criminal behavior in Louisbourg.
The other is marriage.
In the 18th century, this man would stay here for 2 hours, but for our purposes, we will let him go now as if the 2 hours have passed. Il a fait son temps. Libérez le prisonnier. The time is up.
Come on.
Release the prisoner. Give him from my side. Please, s'il vous plaît.
Yes, well, of course. You don't speak French.
Justice is served.
No, not my household.
Et vive le
I'm not
roi.
eating your meat, Pop.
Merci.
Don't be hitting me now.
Merci.
Don't be hitting me. Don't hit me.
Off the road.
All right, all right. I'd rather go to prison. Let me go.
I'm with Elizabeth Tate, curator of textiles here at the wonderful Fortress of Louisbourg. And as I was walking through the streets, I noticed these animators in these wonderful, wonderful costumes. And I'll just, cursory look at them, they struck me as being so well made. So maybe you can tell me a bit about how you actually make them. Is there patterns, or what exactly you do to produce these wonderful costumes?
So the starting point for all of our costumes is research. So to look back and see what people in the 18th century wore, how they dressed. And because this is a French fortification, we're really interested in how the French dressed and what their clothing looked like. So there's kind of an overall silhouette that we're trying to achieve, but we also provide all of the parts that go into making a complete costume. So we have to kind of break it down into individual garments. And each garment then has its own, we're doing research on each individual garment as well. In an ideal world, we would always have an original piece of clothing from the 18th century as the starting point that we can take a pattern from, learn how clothing was put together, try to learn more about the construction techniques. And then, of course, there's sourcing period-appropriate materials. So we have the pattern, we source the materials, and then it's about putting all of that together and constructing the garments. And we try to include as many period construction techniques as possible. There's always compromise. In some cases, we don't know. In other cases, it's that we have to be realistic about what we have access to today and what we can afford to reproduce. And then we take all of those garments and dress our staff, each individual. So we try to provide a complete period costume with all of the accessories. So if it's a gentleman, that he has a wig set in an appropriate style, hats, shoes, stockings, walking sticks. We try to have a complete costume.
Now, most of these costumes would be of natural fibers, right? You don't get any synthetics?
No.
So it would be, what type of fibers, like wool?
Yep. So when I started working here many, many years ago.
I won't ask when you started.
So I thought the four main natural fibers are wool, cotton, linen, and silk. So I thought those were my four choices. And one of the things I've learned that's really interesting is that in the 18th century, there were all kinds of combinations of those four natural fibers. So you could have wool and silk mixed, or cotton and silk, or linen and wool. So that gives us a bit more scope. But no, there were not synthetics. I have been asked, that's a really good example of when we might introduce a compromise, is that if a fabric has the right look, the right pattern, and it would make up into a costume or a garment that would look appropriate, then I would consider something with some synthetic in it. And that's especially the case with some of the ladies, the well-to-do ladies' costumes, where everything is right, but the fiber content isn't quite what we want, so I would compromise on that. And I get more longevity out of it as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing I notice is how well the animators wear these costumes. It's not an easy thing to put something on that's, even if it's reproduced from the 18th century. I mean, to be honest, some of them don't look very comfortable, right?
Yes, and on hot days, I do worry, especially about the soldiers. So, but where would I be without the interpreters? So my job is to reproduce the costumes as well and as appropriate to the period as I can. But it's the interpreters and the staff who make it believable. So they take the costumes and they make them look like citizens of the Fortress of Louisbourg. And I think it's a real credit to our staff that they do such a good job of that.
So I noticed that at some of them, they look like they have hand stitching, like there's a great deal of care that goes into these, right?
So there's been a costume program at Louisbourg for many, many years. It started in the 70s. And right from the get-go, the attention to detail was really paramount. So it was very, very important that for the whole reconstruction, that attention to detail was so important. And there was a huge amount of hand sewing that was done. We still do a lot. We are not doing as much as was done in the 70s and 80s. So we use sewing machines for all of the construction, and then the hand finishing, for the most part, is done by hand. Yeah. I had someone working with me this winter who said that the interior, she really appreciated that the interior of the garment was as beautiful as the exterior, which
Attention
I took
to
as
detail,
very
right?
high praise. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was impressive me.
It was nice it's nice when people notice that.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm in the magnificent fortress of Louisbourg, and I'm speaking to Ruby Fougere, who is the curator of furnishings. And I have to say that this is one of my favorite rooms. It's absolutely beautiful. So tell me, how did this all come about? Where did the furnishings come from? When were they purchased? And where did they come from? I know they came from Europe, but from France, other places.
Well, they did. In fact, the whole furnishings collection is a result of the reconstruction project that started in the early 1960s. I believe it began in 1961. And so the archaeologists were out digging, and they were unearthing thousands of artifacts. The historians on the other side were doing their part. They were doing all kinds of research of thousands of pages of documents that existed in the archives. And within those documents, they found 160 inventories of people who actually lived and died here at Louisbourg. And they took all of that information. It took them a couple of years to get everything straightened out and the research done. And then they decided they were going to hire a material culture researcher named Jean Palardy from Quebec. And he was a specialist in furniture in early French Canada. And so they gave him this information, and they said to him, we need these types of things, because the King's Bastion was the first building to be reconstructed. And so he went to France, he went to Europe, he searched all through Europe, searching for these particular items from the inventories that they were looking for to come back and furnish the King's apartments here and the downtown buildings themselves. And so Palardy bought approximately 6,000 pieces, all told, over many, many years. It was over 10 years that he bought all of these pieces. And he bought some really beautiful pieces, and then he bought some not so beautiful pieces, because they were to be used for study and for reproduction purposes. So our antique collection is basically attributed to him, although we do have some pieces that were purchased by later curators and or donated. So yeah, he did good. He did good.
So people would be curious, how much money did this cost? I mean, he had an unlimited budget. Was there a certain amounts of money he could spend?
Yeah, well, he didn't really have a budget because they sent him to seek out these pieces. So he would spend whatever he thought he could get for them. I guess he bargained for them. I don't really know how he acquired them. We do have invoices for all of the things. So the first boatload of furniture actually arrived in 1968, and it did come by boat. And many boatloads of furniture came thereafter, and some beautiful, beautiful pieces were collected. For example, we have this wonderful portrait of King Louis XV. And we know that that portrait was here, or a portrait like this was here, a full-length portrait of Louis XV, because one of the governors had a full-length portrait of Louis XV in his inventory. And when he died, he left a number of items to the government hall. So he left paintings, he left tapestries, and a clock. So when the next governor came in, those pieces stayed in the government hall.
Now, when I look at this table, I realize that most people don't, when they think of Cape Breton, wouldn't think that 300 years ago there were people sitting here. And they were eating off of porcelain from China,
Exactly.
crystal from Europe, silver.
Yeah, so the room we're sitting in is the salon, and it was part of the government hall. It wasn't part of the private apartments. It would have been a room for functioning, for entertainment. So we're sitting at around a trestle table, and a trestle table is a table that comes apart. The top is separated from the two underpieces, and it's for storage. So once the dinner was finished, they would take it and put it away for storage, and then the room would be used for entertainment, for gaming throughout the night. Now, the porcelain that you see in front of you is called Chinese export porcelain, and it comes from a town called Jindajin in China. And there was thousands of pieces of porcelain at Louisbourg. It's in the historical record. Governor Ducanel had hundreds and hundreds of pieces of this blue and white porcelain, and also an Amari porcelain that had a little bit of red in it. And the archaeological record is extensive. We have thousands and thousands of pieces of archaeological pieces. And these bowls that you see in front of you are reproductions of artifacts from the collection.
Beautiful.
So yes, so they would come from China, they would go to the mother country of France, and then they would be shipped here. And anybody of any kind of status would have porcelain, either to eat from or have it on display.
Also silver and crystal.
Silver, yeah, the spoons are silver.
I understand that in the governor's cob that he had wines from as far away as South Africa.
He did. And he had exotic medicines and he had chocolate. He had 29.5 pounds of chocolate. And chocolate was a very new product at the time, a new drink. So if you had any means, any type of wealth, you would have chocolate. So he was probably taking that for medicinal purposes as well as enjoying it because it warmed and fortified the body. They believed that it did that, and it did. It did. Chocolate did do that. So yes,
Now-
I understand that. It's one of my
now
favorite.
all it gives us is diabetes.
It's one of my favorite foods. But they had dark chocolate back then, and there's a lot of health properties to dark chocolate as well. So it's
Keep trying to
good
make-
with the bad.
My wife keeps trying to make me to eat it, but no,
Well, he had lost his lower left leg in the Battle of Malaga in Spain in 1704. So he was a sickly man, Governor du Canal. So we're actually very fortunate that he died when he did. Because now we have a full inventory
Yes.
of all of his belongings. And it was October, so his pantry would have been stocked for the winter as well. So that's why we're able to furnish the apartment so closely to his inventory.
So the type of clothing that they would have been wearing sitting around this table would have been silks and
Absolutely.
it's hard
Absolutely.
to fathom, 300 years ago when you think of Cape Breton that this existed here.
Exactly.
And,
It was the city and fortifications of the Fortress of Louisbourg.
One of the largest.
It was very prosperous.
It was, and the amount of money being generated here, right,
Absolutely.
But I've always been fascinated with the fact that 300 years ago, you could come in and sit, and it was actually a piece of France here in.
There was
Cape
a
Breton.
piece of France here. We were like a mini-me for France.
Yes, and it's always been one of my favorite rooms.
Yeah, it's a nice size room. Now the officials and the governors, they all complained about the cost of having to support the officers, right? To feed them and to entertain them. It was a big expense. Now when Governor du Canal passed away, his net worth was 22,000 livres.
Yeah, to explain to viewers what a livre was and how much it would be worth in modern terms. Because most people wouldn't have a reference point for what a livre was.
It's really difficult. A livre tournée was a specific amount of money, and there is no Canadian dollar. Like it wasn't the equivalent of a Canadian dollar. So it's really difficult to determine what it was at the time. I know that they would take it and they would cut pieces out of it to pay people. So a livre tournée was worth more than $1, I would say. But we don't know how much exactly.
Let's say, how much would a soldier earn in a year as compared to what he donated?
Soldiers were very low on the scale. Okay, so for example, the governor's salary was, I think, well over 1,000 livres a year. A soldier, maybe a livre and a half a month, I think. I'm not
So
sure.
it's a considerable sum of money.
Yeah, so there's a considerable difference between the two.
Now, Ruby, is there any particular piece of furniture or any artifact here that it tends to be your favorite or you have a story behind it?
I have a lot of favorites, Sandy.
I bet you do.
I do. I talk to the paintings sometimes. I love the paintings because they're so delicate and beautifully done, and the artistry that goes into each one, they're just amazing. So yeah, they're my favorites. I have a few pieces of furniture as well. The clock that you see over there on the wall is another one of my favorites. And the fruitwood chest that you see behind you here, that is an absolutely beautiful Regency piece, and it's fruitwood. It's just gorgeous. And the artistry and the talent that went into painting or creating these pieces of furniture, it's just amazing. I love the collection. I love all of it, but I do have my few favorites, yeah. So my paintings are my favorite because maybe see eyes looking back at me. I get to see them, so yeah, I get to say good morning.
Now, the big question is, do the paintings answer back?
I'm not one to tell that. Sometimes they do. Sometimes I think they do. I think they
I
hear
wonder
me.
what they'd have to say.
Hi. I guess I don't know. I don't know. Hello. Bonjour.
It would have to be in French. They wouldn't be speaking
Bon
English,
matin,
yes.
maybe.